everybody. Welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott Telford.
Josh, friend, I'm in the fanciest place on earth, i.e. WhatCulture Wrestling's own studio, to talk about one of the most sort of hot-button topics in gaming overall, which is the overall length of video games and how much they pee us off over time, sparked very much by Dying Light 2 getting out over the past weekend and announcing that their game would be 500 hours long. Something that I think they thought would go down very positively, and there is obviously the argument to be made for bang for your buck. You're putting a lot of money down on these games, premium investment, obviously, but at the same time, it's very hard to justify 500 hours of worthwhile entertainment or a worthwhile way to spend your time for 500 hours. Now, their initial tweet was them saying that to fully complete Dying Light 2 Stay Human, you'll need at least 500 hours, almost as long as it would take to walk from Warsaw to Madrid. And they said that was 534 hours. Now, obviously, there was a massive backlash to this, and they've done multiple refinements to that statement, sort of trying to get out ahead of the backlash, or trying to get out of the wider backlash and conversation around it to clarify some things. The first update was them saying that it's only 100% for full completion rate, saying that most of the players who are in it for story and side quests will be able to complete the game quicker, and it will still be a solid experience. And then, obviously, everything still was snowballing out of this, and we'll go into the wider ramifications of, game design overall and wasting your time, especially in the open world genre. But they did then say that 500 hours is related to maxing out the game, finishing all the quests, endings, exploring every part of the world, but a regular player should be able to finish the story and the side quests and do a bit of exploring in less than 100 hours. Still, people said, but how long's the game though? So they did another clarification with a lovely little graphic saying that the game itself, the main story, is 20 hours, which is far more manageable. Obviously, that's still a lengthy game, in the grand scheme of things, but it's a nice length for a game. 20 hours for the main story. Then they said 80 hours for the main story and all the side quests, and then they said back to 500 for everything else. So that's 320 hours of not main story, not what you would say is the most worthwhile content, 320 hours of, I'm going to assume, open world BS.
Yeah, the breakdown to me almost made it worse because it's like exactly what you said there. It's like 80 hours of promised what should be good content, but it has me questioning what is the rest and why should I care about 320 hours of what seems like filler. I mean, obviously I've not played the game yet, but my first reaction seeing this over the weekend or whatever was to look at my phone, see that 500-hour boast and just like hoy my phone in the sea because I'm over games just being padded to the absolute brink of death. Like no game needs to just be padded to this length for the sake of it, and that's the kind of vibe that I get here. Obviously, like you alluded to at the very start, games need to be worth the money that you invest in them, but there's no point just giving players their investments worth in terms of, shoddy content or kind of half-baked content or content that's just there so you can say that your game is 500 hours. Like, I'm sure we would much rather have an absolutely pristine, polished 20-hour experience even over something that goes into the hundreds and just feels like a slog.
I'll take a polished 20 minutes these days, mate. Like, just give me anything that actually works and is satisfying to the point where I can go, that's a polished video game that I paid money for, and I'll go and tell my friends about it, or I'll go and talk about it, or whatever. And the thing with Dying Light 2, a couple of the interesting things to throw in here is that Alana Pierce over on her channel was talking about she did get hands-on with the game, and obviously there's gameplay clips out of there too. But she was just saying that she spent a considerable amount of time with it, and the overall feel of it was a lot more open world RPG, a lot more like Skyrim, like a lot more, you're going to sink a lot of time into this thing. And it's not that those ideas weren't endemic in the trailers beforehand anyway, but I think that she was just saying when you actually do get hands-on with it, the overall feel of the game is just so much bigger. It is very ambitious. However, that does kind of go alongside or in the face of or whatever the Gamers Insider Report, where they put together a whole thing, I think it was across last year, about how kind of overblown a lot of the project's goals have been across development, hence why it took so long for it to come out. The original Dying Light was 2015. The Gamer did a whole report based around the CEO Powell, he's called Powell Machuca, saying that apparently the way that he would do general design was that they would start to be towards a build of the game that they were satisfied with. He would get a whole bunch of new ideas for game mechanics and different things that he would want to change, and then he would go into various investors meetings or shareholder meetings and promise a much bigger game than what was actually available that they were putting together in the studio, go back to the coding team, go back to the art department, go, well, we've got to do all this because I've just secured all this new money, and then bloat the game out more and more. Hence 320 hours you can almost literally put on. It's 320 hours worth of BS that he's argued for across the last 7 years.
Yeah, I think, like the game's development is, in general kind of informs why they made this claim initially, because it feels like, this thing has been delayed over and over again. Like you said, the first Dying Light was 2015. People have been waiting for this game for a long time now. And I think being generous, their intention with saying it was 500 hours was to reassure players that the development was worth it. That that they had been spending time making a big game and not trying to polish a game that was broken or whatever. But the issue is, like you said there, we don't know for sure what these extra features are, and we don't really know, at least I don't, as a big fan of Dying Light 1. I don't want to undersell this. I really did enjoy Dying Light 1.
Everything looks really impressive.
I still don't know. Yeah, I still don't know why Dying Light 2 needs to have this RPG focus necessarily, even from that first trailer that they released. I think it was at an E3 or some kind of conference where the developers were saying, look, we're focusing on story and choice this time around. We're going to give you different branching paths. You might not see all of the game and stuff like that. And that's obviously a cool idea. But Dying Light 1, that wasn't why Dying Light 1 was so good. And to see them focus so much on that here, it kind of makes me wonder what their priorities are and whether that's going to pay off in the final build.
Well, I think these days people can identify bloat in a way that they never could before. I think it's very much comes from the Ubisoft approach of open world stuff. I would say the Halo Infinite was very much an Ubisoft style open world game. It was just full of bloat. And I think you can always tell when you're spending time doing something that is fun enough and it's something to do and it's enjoyable enough, but it's not really the core reason why you invested in the first place. It's just something to do for the amount of time that might want to put into it across an afternoon or something. And I think that is kind of what they're aiming for in this case. But like, it is one of those things where maybe when a game is taking this long, and it's published, it seems to be published by Techland as well. It's not Warner Brothers, although that did initially set it in motion, being that they published Dying Light 1 in the first place. But maybe they just feel like this is what they have to do. This is how you justify a long enough development time, and this is the trend. And the Ubisoft, I would argue that the Ubisoft open world has gone past us now, but maybe this is just because of the sheer amount of time it took to put it together. This is just going to be another one of those games, kind of like how Biomutant was another one of those games too.
Yeah, again, I was looking at some gameplay just before we jumped in on this, and I do think Dying Light 2 looks impressive. I think the level of scale in the open world looks really great. The verticality is crazy, like the density of that world looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to explore. It's just, when I look at this breakdown and I see 80 hours of, story and side content, and I see 320 hours of everything else, I just kind of, part of me thinks, why couldn't you even have cut that 320 hours in half or made it a quarter and released this game like 2 years ago? Lower that scope to release it and then move on to the next thing, or add DLC like they did so well for Dying Light 1. Games these days are in development for so long, and I'd argue only a few of them kind of justify that when you see what the content is. You used Ubisoft games as a perfect example there. Like, they are so bloated, and like you said, it's not that I'm arguing that all games need to be 2 hours long, or that length is inherently a bad thing, but bloat is inherently a bad thing. It's a real problem across the board.
Yeah, that's the thing I was going to say before, is that like I said, we can identify bloat now, and I think that one thing that a lot of the people at the top or whatever, however it manifests across each case by case example of different video games, like I said, you get a lot of different amounts of bloat, but most people over their entire life will maybe sink 500 hours into a game that they absolutely love. Like, I very recently, this is a hell of a thing to throw in, I've been very recently playing a lot of WWF No Mercy, and a lot of people got in touch with me to be like, that's a game that I just played for my entire childhood. And it's just one of those things where if you make a game that has various enjoyable gameplay loops, but they are restrained, like they loop around again, they don't just endlessly spiral off into big old noodle piles of stuff to do, then I think that's the distinguishing point. You can still play any game for 500 hours if it's worthwhile. And I've played 600 hours of The Witcher 3, but that's not a game that was necessarily designed to be bloated. Like, every part of that feels intentional, and I think that's the crux. And obviously they're out there advertising that, bang for your buck, put this money down, you're up against various other games that will be costing the same amount of money, we'll give you 500 hours of stuff to do. And I think that is appealing to some people, and I get the appeal massively, but I'll be curious how this actually goes down, like, overall. I think that obviously the lengthy development is an issue, and that, where do you come down on the literal bang for your buck side of it? Like, just the idea of, well, I can pay for 500 hours of something, or I can pay for 15 hours of something.
I think, once over, I was very aware of wanting to get the most hours out of something. But now, in an era where every game, can be 100 hours or so if you wanted to. And I'm talking about like the big open world games in this regard. I am way more specific about what I want to play these days. I am way more understanding of the fact that I only have a limited amount of time, and if every game is a 200-hour epic, there's only so many of those I can realistically properly sink my teeth into in a year. So I'm way more picky. So when I see something like 500 hours like this, I want to know that it's going to be worth 500 hours worth of investment. I don't want to get there 200 hours in and feel like I'm repeating myself. I feel like I'm not doing anything meaningful. I just want the time to mean something. You know, bang for your buck is good, but I just don't think the culture of gaming at the moment facilitates everything being this long, because we simply just don't have the time for it.
Well, no, and also completion stats. Like, most people don't finish games. It's been the case in most of the 2010s, but you do have notable examples like Red Dead Redemption 2, where its completion stat on PS4/5 or whatever, or its trophy data is about 25% of people actually got through that. So it's like, that's the thing to change. Like, make more worthwhile, tighter video games that don't feel like they're wasting your time or that burn you out over time. We'll see how it goes. Dying Light 2 is out in a good few weeks. I think it's the 4th of February. It's pinned down for at the minute. And we'll see how the general reception to that goes alongside the reviews, the cultural and critical reception and everything. But let us know what you think down in the comments as to your general thoughts on length in video games. Would you rather just have a game that gives you 500 hours of something versus 15 hours of more focused something, but the price is the same? For now, I've been Scott from I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
It's actually WhatCulture Gaming, but bye-bye.
Bye-bye.